on. All right. If y'all could go ahead and mute your microphones until we open it up for discussion, and then y'all can ask questions then, and we can talk about it then. So I always like to start with kind of a word, because this company's more than just a brokerage for me. It's a ministry, and I really want to be able to help as many people as possible, and also spread the love of God. And so there's a lot of stuff in the news about recession and inflation and rising interest rates, and there's a lot of worry about what's going on in the world and this market, especially. And some of the topics that we're going to talk about today are, some of them aren't always going to be all that bright and cheery, but I do want to remind y'all that, God, he cares about us, and he doesn't want us to be anxious or worrisome about these little things. We need to have the eternal perspective, which is, we're going to be spending eternity in heaven. We're not going to be here all that long, and all this stuff in the grand scheme of things just really doesn't matter. But it matters now because it affects us in our pocketbook. So we will deal with it, but he's just saying, don't be anxious about it. Just deal with it in a calm way, trusting God, knowing that he's going to take care of us. And the scripture that I wanted to bring to light on that is the Luke 12:24, where he says, consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap, they neither store, they don't have a storehouse or a barn, yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than the birds? And which of you, being anxious, can add one single hour to your span of life? And then there at the end of it, it says, instead seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. So he actually gives you kind of what you're supposed to do whenever you're feeling anxious. You're supposed to seek his kingdom. So whenever you're stressing about recession, or I don't have any deals coming through, or I don't have any leads right now, he's saying seek his kingdom. And so there's work for you to do. There's something for you to do, and it will be added to you. So that means that God will bless you through your work. So what does seeking his kingdom mean? Well, it's the priorities of God. What is important to God? And we're supposed to bring the kingdom of God to here on earth, and it be all around us. So what's important to God is, number one, loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then the second is loving your neighbor as you love yourself. So as long as you are doing these things, and of course, reading the Bible, learning about God, improving your understanding and your faith, and growing in that area, that's going to help you seek his kingdom. And out of that, God's going to bless you. He's going to give you everything that you need, and you don't have to stress about it. And, I actually have a testimony about this that I wanted to share. So whenever I was about 30, 31, somewhere around there, I was really living just kind of for myself, and I was spending all the money that I was getting, and I was in a financial bind. I was divorced. I was having to pay child support. I didn't know how I was going to pay for all my bills and pay for child support and, take care of all this stuff. And I had started going back to church because I just felt like I was lost. I was not in a good place, and I'd already made a series of bad choices that had put me there. And so I was, back to seeking after God because it was time for a change. And so, I really didn't know. And then there was this message that was just about, tithing and being faithful to God, giving to him back to him first what is his, and then he'll give you everything. So it's easier to live off the 90 than the 10 is what they always say. And I'm just like, man, the numbers just don't work. I don't see how that works. It doesn't make any sense. And so I said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do it. And so I just did it. And what was really cool is that I got a raise. I was able to get a second job without any problems that was covering all of my bills, including the extra bills. And then I actually was able to save up enough money and like actually store money into a savings account, which had never happened, in the years prior to that. And so it was just amazing. And ever since then, I have just not stressed about money. It was just one of those things like once you've gone through something like that, you just know God's right there, that he's going to give you everything that you need. And so there's nothing to worry about. And so I wanted to, talk about a few things. Number one, apartment locator industry, where we're at. I know that there's, based on what I'm seeing on my side of it. So I'm able to see all the different markets, who's doing well, who's struggling. There's some agents that we've had for several years who have moved over to the residential side away from apartment locating that were in the DFW area just because it was so much of a struggle. I will say that the demand in North Texas is just, it was absurd. It was just absolutely absurd. And so a lot of these apartment communities have become more particular about what is required in order for you to get paid. And so the agents are having to step through more hoops. They're having to do more work in order to ensure that they're getting paid. And, it's really making honest people out of a lot of the agents. I know whenever I used to do apartment locating back at You Move Free back in '06 through into the 11, 12, 13 area, there was not that much honesty. Someone call you up and be like, hey, I put your name down. How do I get my free move? And you're like, oh, okay, great. And you put it down and you send over the lease verification, you get paid, everybody's happy. But nowadays you can't really get away with something like that. I mean, apartment communities, they want to see guest cards. They want to see you, doing your part. And in all honesty, that's probably going to be really good for you guys later on, because eventually the apartment communities, their occupancy is going to drop. The market always ebbs and flows. It's going to come around. And so one day, they're going to come back paying us 100, 200% to send them clients, and they're going to be more lax. But at that time, we've already established, some good habits on how to make sure that we're taking care of our clients and proving up that they do owe us a commission. Now, I will say that the Houston agents are faring quite a bit better than the Dallas Fort Worth area. They still have plenty of 100% properties to choose from. Up in the Dallas Fort Worth area, a lot of properties are dropping like their commission altogether. They were 50% before, now they go down to 25% or no locator at all. And so our options have gone down. However, there's a few things to consider. Number one, what's causing all this? First of all, it's demand. Demand is just really making the apartment locating industry difficult right now in the state of Texas. There's just so many people moving over from California. There's they even say in some of these articles that I've been reading that immigration is affecting it, both from refugees coming from overseas as well as from Mexico. There's people that are, coming to Texas. There's a lot of people coming to Texas, and we actually have some of the better housing market as well as employment in the country, and that's why so many people are coming here. But interest rates have started to kind of tamp that down. Things to consider on that area is that whenever interest rates go up, there are a number of people that were just barely able to qualify are now not able to qualify. Not to mention prices on homes have gone up so much. I know that a house that I have in Allen went up 43% year over year. The one in Plano I had went up 28% year over year. And so these types of hikes really do affect the affordability of houses. And so How does that affect the apartment community? Well, if people can't buy houses, they have to rent apartments. They're moving to the area. They're here most likely. So they've got to live somewhere. Apartments are the more affordable option that are kind of a temporary solution for some people before until they're able to afford a house. And so higher interest rates have caused extra demand on the apartment locating market. Record low occupancy levels in Texas, especially North Texas. The top three were Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, and then Houston's down a little bit. You know, it's below all of those. I'm not sure why. I don't know why North Texas has just been a hotbed, but they're actually ranked in the top 5 of areas where new construction is happening for multifamily communities. And so that's where you start talking about supply. So I've seen mixed news. Dallas Fort Worth is in the top 5 of all of them across the country. I've seen them in first all the way down to 5th. And then there's actually other markets in Texas that are being built up as well, that have a number of units coming online this year and next year. San Antonio, Austin. I don't know why, but Houston wasn't even ranked on any of those. But so that's actually decent news. You know, as we have more supply coming in, that market will start to correct. The prices should cool down. But at the same time, you know, we need more supply than what they're saying. So I actually posted an article that said that in order for the apartment communities to keep up with the demand, they have to build 19,000 units a year for the next 10 years in order to match the demand that's forecasted for this area. That's in the DFW area. And so, and the Dallas Fort Worth already, I don't know if it's the large, it's like 1 or 2 in most apartment rentals available. So like you have up in the Northeast, you have like apartment buildings there, but they're all sold like condos. They're all individual units, and they do have some where they sell individual units and lease those as well. But for the most part, they're all individually owned. Then you have outside of those big metro areas, then you have what's like here in Dallas, Fort Worth and Houston, where there's apartment buildings where they're building 600 unit complexes and having a central leasing office where they're leasing out individual units to people, and it will always be that way. They're not sold or anything like that. And so that's what I'm talking about whenever I'm talking about apartment communities. And so Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, those make up, I think we have almost 4,000 apartment communities inside of our system. And that's just what we've worked with over the years. That doesn't count. I mean, there is probably at least twice as many, if not more, that either don't work with locators or we haven't even worked with them yet. So there's so much more in this area. I have a business relationship that I have up in, he's out of Chicago. And so they actually have a whole referral system. They have people working leads for Texas, and they tried to, you know, infiltrate the rest of the US. They've even done Florida, which I've heard that there's a lot of apartment communities out there. But he said that Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston are the top 2 markets for apartment locating, and there really isn't anything to compare throughout the country. I know Atlanta has a pocket. They have some apartment communities. You've got Nashville has some, Denver, Colorado, but these are all little, you know, pockets here and there. They're not as proliferated as our Metroplex and Houston. They've been having, you know, apartments in these areas for 40 years. And so it's just so ingrained into Texas that there's just no other place that compares to it in any case. So there's actually some history that we can rely on that's going to help us to know what to kind of expect. Number one, you had back in the 80s, I don't know if y'all, not everybody was around then. I was very young, but I heard enough about it. There was record inflation at that time. And that was one of the things that Reagan was adamant about getting rid of. And so he raised interest rates to I think like 18%. I mean, the interest rates were absurd. They were 18, 19, 20%. They were very, very high. And so whenever you raise interest rates, that actually decreases spending, decreases inflation. That's the control that the US government uses to try to keep inflation under control, keep the dollar value at a certain level. And so I don't know if y'all been seeing, but in the news, they've been talking about inflation for the last year or so. And all of the inflation is because it's a symptom of too much money in the market. And I'm sure all of y'all were aware, but the government basically printed several $1 trillion and gave it away to people over the last few years through COVID. They just sent out checks to everyone saying, here you go, here you go, here you go. Whenever you print that much money and all of that money is being spent in the market, that's going to cause inflation. On top of that, there was a bunch of supply issues. And so it was like a perfect storm. You had too much money in the market. There's not enough supply into the economy. And so prices start going up. And then you have this Russian-Ukraine thing that affected all of our gas prices. I'm sure y'all noticed that. And so almost all of our goods are transported through trucks throughout the country. That is going to cause rising costs as well. And so all of this has caused things to be more expensive. Well, through that inflation, they increased interest rates. And if you go and you look at the apartments like lists services, you can see that there's like no apartments prior to 86. And then all of a sudden in like 1986 to 89, there's this huge boom of apartment communities. There's a whole series of them in that year. As a matter of fact, most of like the Village and North Dallas and all of those areas were built in the mid to late 80s. And then it kind of tampered out in the 90s and 2000s. And then in 08, you had another like change in the market. And all of y'all saw that. It was the whole housing crisis or whatever, and the recession. People stopped doing everything that they were doing. So there weren't very much built. And then after that, you started seeing them all coming back again. Well, right now with interest rates going up, you're going to see less building. So they're not going to be building as much. Everything that's in the pipeline to be built this year and next year was already under construction, permitted, everything over the last 2 years. And so it takes them 2 to 3 years to really get anything up and going and then live. And so after that, though, they're forecasting another period of time where there's not going to be any more apartments built until interest rates get to a better rate, and it's more cost effective at that time. So what do we have to expect? What should we expect as agents, as apartment locators? What does this look like for us? Well, what we need is really a recession. I'm sure a lot of people don't want to hear that, but in 2008, whenever I was working through that whole recession, our average invoice doubled over that next year. And it's because whenever you have massive amounts of layoffs, people can't afford apartments or houses. They're having to move in with friends. They're moving back home to parents. That is a decrease in demand. So we need that. We also, with the houses that are being built, I don't know if y'all still see, but there's still a lot of houses that are being built. The housing market is cooling off, and some of y'all may have started to realize that and see it and maybe even be dealing with it. But all of these builders that have shifted their gears to build all these homes really fast and cheap, especially in like the outskirts of towns, they're changing their brand names to like Express and stuff like DHI Express. And they're building these homes with like half the windows that they used to, and IKEA like furnishings. And I mean, everything's just cheap, cheap, cheap. And these houses will eventually have to sell. They're going to be live, and there's not going to be anybody there to buy them. So you're going to start seeing increased amounts of these houses are going to be turned into rentals. Y'all may even see some of the houses on the market that have been sitting there, especially in the upper levels, like anything over 300,000. If it's been sitting more than a week or so, you may even see it as a lease also. Well, that increases the number of supply on the leasing side. So who's going to choose a house versus an apartment? Well, if they're priced almost the same, you may choose a house instead, if that is the option. And so I really do think that we're going to have some more supply coming in. It won't necessarily be apartments, but I do think over the next year, we should start to see a market correction. I don't think prices are going to go up much more, if at all. It may go flat for a while. And then hopefully we'll start to see specials and more opportunities for apartment locators over the next year. You just got to get through this period until then. And just keep in mind that eventually these apartment communities are going to need us again. So the residential market, there's two sides of it: residential sales and leasing. I kind of touched on that already. So CNBC actually reported that mortgage demand has dipped to its lowest in 22 years. So since before 2000. That means that the number of people that are requesting pre-approval letters has gone dramatically low. And that's because people are all kind of like bracing. They're all thinking, okay, what's going to happen? I see all these big companies laying off people. I might be one of those people getting laid off. I don't need to be buying a house right now. So they're saying, let's just wait and see. There's also people who have been priced out, so they can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford the mortgage that comes with it, with the higher interest rate, which is double what it was just 6 months ago. And so there's, different things that are causing people to be a little bit more cautious and weary about what they're going to do next. And so because of that, everybody's kind of stopped. And what we'll see over the next, I'm thinking 3 to 6 months, is we're starting to see the market correction. People have been getting houses to, list, and they're super excited. They're like, okay, clients, we need to plan on y'all being out of this house. I actually had, as a matter of fact, one of my rentals, and this pains me to say, this guy, his agent had told him, you need to move out of the house. So go ahead and get your rental property, move into it, and just lease it. And then we'll figure out a situation later. So he leased one of my properties. The guy is an attorney, makes lots of money. And I'm thinking, okay, this is great. 6 weeks later, they still haven't sold the house. It's been sitting on the market. He's like, I can't afford to keep this going. The agents told me, we've already dropped it 50,000. We're having to drop it another 50,000. And I don't really know how long this is going to take. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to move out of this house. And so I'm having to deal with him in this, but this is very common. A lot of agents have convinced their clients that these homes are just going to fly off the market. You're going to have 30 showings in your first couple of days. So you don't even need to be there. You need to be gone. Just go ahead and buy whatever you're going to be in, or lease, or whatever. And it's going to be fine. It's going to sell. Well, that time's gone for a lot of people. Now, there may be pockets and areas that it's still like this, and demand will still be strong in some areas versus others. That's always going to be the case. And one thing to rest assured is that the state of Texas and how the housing market is here is there's always good demand. There's always good, I'll say it's never, you don't have houses that are like a nice house that sits for 6 months or a year or something like that. If those types of situations don't really happen, a bad market that I've been witness to is where a house maybe sits for 3, 4, 5 months. And the average in a given area, depending on the demand, might be 90 days to sell a house. It's not normal for a house to sell within a week. That's not common. And so we are actually going to start seeing a market where it starts to normalize, and we start to see houses maybe sitting for a couple of months before they get sold. And that's actually getting back to normal. That's nothing to stress about. The problem is all these clients have seen their friends and their family and all this stuff. They've sold their house in a week. They got $100,000 over ask. So those expectations are still there. And Zillow and Realtor.com and all these websites are still showing these crazy amounts for these houses. And so people think, oh, well, my house is worth $800,000, even though it's not really taken into account that there's 3 other houses just like it in that neighborhood that have already been sitting for a month and they haven't sold yet, and they've already dropped their price. And so there's something to, be learned from that. Whenever you start to get a listing, really kind of temper their expectations, help them to understand that there's record low demand right now. And so if you're needing to sell quick, you need to be aggressive, and be ready to take a haircut. You're not going to get what you would have 2 months ago. Okay, so let's see, let me go through my notes here. So I, in previous roundtables, I've kind of said, hey, the market's cooling. And each time agents have said, I'm not seeing that. I am going to be curious. I am going to ask that at the end of this, if I'm still the only one who's seeing it, or if anyone else is actually seeing these same types of things. Now, the other side of residential is the leasing side. So this industry actually runs parallel with the apartment industry. There's a lot of similarities here. So rising commissions, rising, like lowering rental amounts, all of that runs parallel to each other because they are both leasing side of it. Now, some people can afford houses, some people can only afford apartments. Apartments do cater to a different demographic for the most part. However, those still run in tandem. Back in 2008, the commissions rose at that time. You started to see a hike in the commission amount that was being paid out on leases there. With residential leasing, it's been actually very strong market up until recently for the upper end areas. Even houses that were, listed at $4,000 a month were still being leased very quickly. Now it's still strong. I still think that these are going to be leasing quickly, but what I had mentioned earlier, which is houses that are not being sold they're going to have to get them off their books somehow. And so you'll start to see houses that aren't being sold also being listed for lease. And whenever you have that bump in supply, that means that people are going to have more options, which means that unless if your house is, like Chip and Joanne Gaines's house, it's probably not going to lease for all that fast. So keep that in mind. And again, try to get your clients into an understanding that if they want to lease it quickly, leaving it with the stains in the carpet and the holes in the walls and it all kind of junky looking, that's not how you lease a house quickly in a market that doesn't have as much demand as it used to. So these are all things to consider as you start to see that side of the market cooling off in the coming months. Okay. So the new forms, it was crazy whenever I saw that in the Realtor magazine. First of all, you guys that are realtors, y'all should be getting magazines. If you aren't, call your association. You should be getting a Texas Realtor magazine and a national, it just says realtors on it, but that's from the National Association of Realtors. There is very helpful information, especially in the Texas Realtors magazine, that talks, just keeps you abreast of all the news. It talks about legislation that they're pushing through. It talks about the new forms. It talks about all kinds of different things. And then there's a bunch of stuff that, doesn't really impact you, and things that you just kind of skim over like any other magazine, but there's very helpful information in there. So if you aren't reading it, please, take a few minutes, put it in the bathroom, something to where you at least peruse over it so that you can learn what's important, what's updated, what's new. And so new forms, they came out with a referral agreement between broker form. This form, I was like, wow, that's really cool, because I don't know if y'all know, but in our agent portal, we have the National Association's realtor form. I just actually found that online a few years back, posted it on there because it kind of checks all the boxes, but it's not like a promulgated form. It's not a, a legal document per se. Sure, it is once everybody signs it and there's agreed and you can use that. I just use it as a good template, but for them to actually come up with a promulgated form, I thought that was really great. One of the things that really kind of concerned me about it, though, whenever I was reading through it, is that it's for Texas only. So there's a lot of referrals that come into our brokerage. I have agents saying, hey, I've got a friend who's wanting to buy a house in Knoxville or something like that. And so how do I do that referral? I use that National Association of Realtors form because there's no restriction on that. This Texas Association of Realtors referral form actually puts only to be used by Texas realtors. And there's even a section on that form that says this form is only valid in the state of Texas or something like that. And so if you have a referral that's outside of Texas, don't use this form. If you're an apartment locator and you're wanting to use some type of referral form that you're not a part of the association, but you have someone who's wanting to buy a house and you want to refer it, you can use this form. The Association of Realtors is not going to come knock on your door and arrest you for using one of their forms. They just prefer you don't, because it's kind of a membership type thing, but nothing's going to happen to you. I know lots of people that use the TAR application, that use the TAR lease agreement. They've never been a realtor. They never will be a realtor. They're not even licensed people. They use those forms because they're posted online, they're available, and they're good contracts that you can use. So don't stress about it. If you want to use it within Texas, keep that in mind. There's some other forms that have been revised that are, you should take note of. The residential lease has been revised. The commercial lease has been revised. The residential lease application has been revised. And the buyer walkthrough has been revised, and they're all pretty much related to this whole sight unseen thing. So there's been a number of people moving from like California and out of state. They don't have time to fly here or move here or anything like that. And so they've been leasing and buying sight unseen because there's so much demand. They don't have enough time to go look from California before someone else has already seen it and put it in an application. And so there was a lot of sight unseen that was happening. And so the Association of Realtors felt that there was a lot of risk and liability out there through that. And so they adjusted these forms to include that stuff. There's also some other changes through like occupancy information, that kind of stuff. So just, go through, read those forms, make sure you're using the updated forms. If you have these leases and applications and walkthroughs saved on your computer, you need to go ahead and chunk them. Go to zip form, go to, the website, texasrealestate.com. They have all those forms available on there. You can download the new version and use those going forward. Almost all the representation agreements have been changed as well. So make sure you do give those a read, because almost all four of those are used on a regular basis for the agents here at Spirit Real Estate. So other forms, so just to give y'all an idea, so like the last time they did an update, it was a year or two ago, and there was like 7 forms that they updated. They updated or added 44 forms in this turn. So there is so much change that they just did. So if y'all are curious what those are, I will post the link, the texasrealestate.com, and there's form changes and adopted revisions. It has a whole list of them. You can go through and see each of the forms so that you can know what's been going on. Okay, so that wraps up me talking. I wanted to open it up for discussion, see if anybody had any questions. I did want to ask, is anyone else seeing houses sitting a little bit longer, not flying off the market? Is anyone else seeing the kind of the market cool down? Does anyone else have input on that? I'll go ahead and shut up and let someone else talk. Crickets.
Yeah, well, I'm in Midland, so I'm like, I know y'all are all in different areas, but in Midland, I'm seeing it. I have 3 listings and 2 of them, like they're not even hardly getting showings. It's
Mm-hmm.
insane. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I did the comps, when we listed them, houses in their area were selling within the first week. They were under contract and the rates were really good. And now I'm going through and I'm doing research in the MLS and noticing that those houses that were on the market the same time we placed are still sitting there. And out of probably 80 to 90% of them are already lowering their rates within the first 30 days. So we were selling houses like super quick. And now it's like I feel like the light switch. It wasn't even a gradual. It just went from bam to nothing. And they're just, and I can't get them to lower their rates. Like every time I do research, I'm like, okay, it's where we need to be. And they'll lower it like 1,000 or 2, but that's it. Because in their mind, like you said, they're still like, no, so-and-so sold for such and such across the street. I'm like, well, that was last month. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's been a huge change. I had one listing in Plano. So they went under contract. He could more than afford to buy both houses, but the loan officer said, no, better safe than sorry. Just wait to sell your house after it closes. We're talking about 4 weeks. And I was like, man, that's not okay. We really need to put it on the market right now because I feel like things are changing. And we put it on the market a month later and it sat for 60 days before I ended up getting a tenant in it to lease it because we couldn't get it sold. It just sat there. We lowered it a couple of times. He was saying, should we keep lowering it? And I was like, I actually think that if you lower it too much, it's just going to hurt you in the long run. It's better to just lease it, and financially you'll work out better in the end. And he agreed. We leased it within a week because it was a really strong still leasing market. I have another agent. I don't think she's on this call, but she has a house that's listed in the East Plano area. She had just done all these renovations on it, and she priced it like some of these Keller Williams people do, like $100,000 lower than comp just to get a bidding war. It didn't sell. She didn't get multiple offers. She hasn't been able to get it sold yet. And that's $100,000 lower than comps. And so if that gives you any idea as to what's happening right now, I mean, there was one house that I sold last year. It backed up to Murphy Road, which is like a 6-lane road with traffic all the time. There's a Walmart in the back with lights on all night. I mean, this type of house is the type of house that will sit for a year and not be able to sell in a normal market because it's that kind. It sold. We bought it. My client, he bought it full ask, and it was only on the market for a week. And there were other offers at that time. And so like, that's the type of market it was. That's not the case anymore. Those things don't happen. You're going to start seeing houses that are not in good locations. They're going to sit and they're not going to sell fast. Even houses that are nice, they may not get all that many showings. And again, I say, you got to temper the expectations of your clients because they've all got amnesia. They don't remember what it was like before this last market over the last year. They don't realize that it wasn't normal for a house to sell before 30 days. I mean, that was fast back then, was to sell it within a month. You were the realtor of the year if you could sell it within a month. But that's not nowadays. If it sits a week, if they still are on the market after a week, they're like, what are you doing wrong? You need to host more open houses. You need to be here all day for an open house. That's why it's not sold, is because you're not marketing it. You're not doing something right, because
That's always our fault.
yeah, exactly. Oh, of course. Yeah. So that's what I'm, trying to help people, hey, you guys need to be communicating this to your clients, because if you're like these other realtors who are like, oh, we're still in the best, strongest market of all time, and I'm going to get your house sold over ask in the first week, it's going to make you into a liar and you're going to look really bad. So just,
How would you suggest getting them to lease? neither one of them, they're a brother team, the two of the houses, they're brothers, and they moved, they're doing some other stuff, but they're not even open to leasing it. I thought surely that would be at least income because they're paying on the mortgage, but they're not open.
Yeah. In all honesty, like you can't like make them do anything. And a lot of times I've always erred on the side of I try to get them to come to their own conclusions by things that I say that aren't necessarily direct, but more like indirect. Just talking about the benefits of leasing as having a rental property. I know that I have two rental properties that I own. I have one that I manage and one that's going to be coming online next spring. I personally manage these. Y'all don't think about doing property management. I don't allow that. But anyways, the if they're having to pay that mortgage payment every single month, eventually they're going to be like, okay, this is money just going out the door. Lowering the price of a home by $1,000 or $2,000 doesn't do anything. So one thing that I talk about in our residential training is that this is the day and age that lists from realtors are basically a waste of time. Every client who's ready to buy a house is on realtor.com, Zillow.com every single day during their breaks, during their off time, as they're laying in bed, they're looking online and they see the house that they want. They're shopping. That's what we do. We're a shopping online America. And so the days of us sending lists and people picking houses off the list and then us going to look at houses on the list, those days are just gone. I haven't actually sold a house from a list that I sent a client in like 7 or 8 years. It just almost, I still send them. They're like, hey, can you send me listings? Yeah, sure. It's about as productive as an open house, but these things you do because it's what's expected. But like people are shopping online. And so the reason why I say that is because it's a search engine type issue. If you lower a house from $399 down to $392.5, you are hitting the exact same client base. Because whenever you search online, what do you search to? Do you search up to $393? No, you search up to $400,000, or you search up to $450, or you search up to $475. People like nice round numbers that they understand. And so they're not searching up to an exact number. So whenever you have people that want to list a house for $378, you're basically leaving money on the table. So you either need to round up and do like 379.9, or round down and do like 369.9, or if you want to be more aggressive, go to 349.9. Because if you think about it, which numbers are going to be most often searched? The higher watermarks are going to be at the bigger numbers, like the 50s and the hundreds. Those are going to be searched most often. So whenever you're talking to a client about lowering a price and they're like, okay, go ahead and lower it $4,000. Just tell them that's not going to do anything. That's going to be completely ineffective. If you're going to want to lower it, we need to lower it down to the next rounded number that's going to have a different demographic whenever they search. And so that is going to be how you're going to get more clients to view a property. Anytime you do a rate change like that, it will, show up higher on the list on these websites like Realtor and Zillow and them. But if you don't have it at a rounded amount, then you're still hitting the same client base, which means they've already seen it. They're not really going to do anything about it. So it'll be completely ineffective. Okay. I don't know if that really answered your question or not, but
yeah, it did. It helped. I did not realize that on the 2,000 to 3,000. I just figured every time we lowered it, it was just going to kind of bump them up.
But it's the same client base. It's the same people who are searching the
Yeah, I
same.
never looked at it that way. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
I noticed, so I was curious if you've noticed, I'm doing a lot of rental work with like ExxonMobil because I do a lot of relocation work for them.
Mhm.
And so I pull a list for rentals in Midland. I get 2 in their budget. The guy sends me his own list and he's got 5. I felt like so incompetent. I'm like, where are you finding these? So they were all from Zillow. So I went through and looked at them, and Zillow was allowing the independent house owner, the
Yep.
landlord, to
Yeah.
post without going through a realtor at all.
Yes. So the way Zillow works is you can actually get your own account, a free account through Zillow to where you can post your own listings. Property managers who are non-licensed people use Zillow. That's what they use. And so they will go on and they'll post their own listings and get their own leads from that. I've used it before. The leads are okay. I found that the MLS is more effective. As an agent, though, what you have to do is call that individual, the landlord, and say, hey, are y'all working with agents? Are y'all paying a commission? Some of them will still pay a commission. So I still follow it. I always tell my clients, hey, if you're looking on Zillow, just know that that information is not going to be as accurate as realtor.com, because realtor.com is tied with the MLS, whereas Zillow is actually a brokerage. So their data is not going to be quite as accurate. So I try to dissuade them from using Zillow.
Gotcha.
Zillow's the enemy. we don't we don't want to be sending them to Zillow. So if y'all are recommending Zillow, stop doing it. Tell them realtor.com. But in any case, they may still use it. You just have to call that property just to see if they are. And that's same with sales. They do sales too. FSBOs will put houses on the market on Zillow and get leads that way. You can still call the owner, just say, hey, I've got a client who might be interested. Are you guys still paying a commission? And if you've got a client that's genuinely loyal to you, they'll only go to a house that they know you're going to get paid on. Or they may say, well, let's go look at it. And if I do it, I'll just pay you a commission, something like that. You just, do the extra work to make sure that you get taken care of, and it'll be fine. Don't just say, I'm sorry, that's not us. Definitely, feel it out to see if it's a good opportunity for your clients.
Awesome. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. There's a little chat here. Let me see. Kelsey said, my listing in Carrollton has been on the market 2 days. We have 2 offers. We've had about 5 to 6 showings so far, but the offers are honestly a lot lower than I expected based on the comps in the area. But still, 2 offers is good. I would encourage your clients to at least try to work them as best as possible, because if it goes past this first week, they may be sitting for a little while. Just keep that in mind. You guys, if y'all haven't done my residential sales training, there's a part where I talk about all offers are good offers. And the reason why I say that is because it's our job to get both sides to the table. It's not our job to tell our clients what's a good offer and what's a bad offer. Just getting them to consider negotiating, even if it's a bad offer, they can still send back a bad negotiation. They can go down $1, whatever they want to do. But you want to try to keep the offers on the line, because what do other agents do before they go show a house? Well, they call the listing agent saying, hey, are y'all working any offers? The best thing you could do for your clients is be able to say, yes, as a matter of fact, we are. They're considering them right now. Are y'all able to get out to look at it today? It adds a sense of urgency, not only to the agent, but to the clients. And that client will take that offer into consideration, knowing that, okay, if I do like this, if I want to do something, I need to do something now, and I need to do it strong so that I can ensure that I get it. Because if they go and they fall in love with it, that's going to be it. But if there's no other offers on the table, it's a different situation. They may think, oh, I can wait a day or two. I could think on it. Or it's been on the market for a week. Let's send them a lowball offer and see what happens. These types of things happens whenever you don't have multiple offers. I'm not saying it's bad. You can work any offer that comes your way. But It's just the ideal situation is if you have 2 offers like you do, Kelsey, and be able to work them, do what you can. Anybody else have any questions or discussion or anything that they want to bring up? We got about 10 minutes left. Man, I should get like a sound bite for crickets so I can play it whenever this stuff happens. Okay. All right, guys. I'll go ahead and cut it off here. I'm so glad each of y'all were able to attend. I will send out a link of this video as well as the link to the forms that have been adopted and changed, so y'all can have access to those. And then if y'all have any questions, of course, if you need anything, y'all should have my cell. If you don't, email me and I'll send it to you. But if you need anything, just let me know. Okay. All right. Y'all have a wonderful day, and God bless.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
You too.